All right, thanks everybody for attending another Team 3 focus discussion. This one's a little different. Usually we have bespoke lesson plans for these focus discussions, but when things started closing down in California, some of you know that AYSO had an event coming up in Southern California, the expo for sections 1, 10, and 11. How many of you were scheduled to go to that? Miller put his hand up. I know that.
Me?
Vehicle burglaries, which
Yeah, I think a handful of folks in this meeting were. If you weren't, in the future, it's a good opportunity. Most of you are probably already involved in your region, area, or section staffs in one way or another. And then you go there for networking and for workshops. So what we did is we have adapted a workshop that Miller and I were going to lead at that expo. When Cindy taught, it was over a month ago now. That was when she was going to lead at the expo as well. We figured, hey, everyone's got these prepped up and didn't get to teach them, so why don't we just teach them? So that being said, Miller and I were given the opportunity to lead the workshop on proactive refereeing, which is a fun concept. So I am Louis Elliott. You can see me on the loop there. Let me see if I can get my fancy laser pointer out. Yeah, so that's me, Louis Elliott here. And then there's Miller over there. You want to say hi, Miller?
Howdy, howdy.
Hello. You can tell from our faces, he's the friendly one. I am not. Yeah, and everyone here attended last week, so you got Miller's intro. But just real quick, Miller and I are both advanced instructors, correct, Miller?
Yes,
right, so?
Yep.
National referees. Are you a national referee assessor?
I am working towards that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that was the last ladder I started trying to climb, the assessor one. I didn't want to be one of the bad guy assessors, and I hope I'm not yet. So, yeah. So I know I have a very proactive style of refereeing. I'd rather not have trouble than get into it. So this is a fitting topic for me. So let's go ahead and see what we got going with it. Good referees. Good referees are students in the game that helps them be proactive. You can you feel what's coming next. That you get that sense of what helps you control the match if you know what's coming next. Good referees can read the game in a way that establishes good control. And good referees anticipate what fouls are coming based on which player has the ball, where it is on the field, the exact situation of play. It can be you can almost have foresight that way. You can forecast, certainly. So good referees use this to keep track of who's fouling and who's being fouled in order to proactively end persistent infringement, which is always a tough one to teach because how many is persistent? We never have a number. So we got some simple objectives for tonight. We're going to give guidance for a proactive approach to managing the game. And that starts with pregame preparation, reading the game, match control and positioning are tactics to obtain that. And we're just going to keep in mind that refereeing is thinking more so than ever when you're trying to be proactive. You're looking forward, interpreting what's happened to be able to forecast what may happen. So good referees are students of the game, right? For those of you who didn't read ahead, what's it mean to be a student of the game?
You understand tactics and strategy?
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty broad, but you understand what the attacking team at the time or the defending team is trying to do. You can see positioning, etc.
Yeah, we have some experienced and gifted coaches attending tonight, and they referee with that insight. You look at Miller, he's played at a high level and he's coached at a high level, and he brings different things to the game than I, who played until I was 11. Decided it was time to switch over to refereeing because you can't lose at refereeing. And I've coached 2 games in my life. Yeah, so it's definitely an asset to have the player background, have the coach background, and you can see that in a referee's style,
I
especially.
just want to challenge the supposition that you can't lose at refereeing. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
I say who wins.
So let me take a shot at the student in the game, Lewis, just when I was reflecting on that. So it's interesting because every time I do a game, I realize I don't know everything. There's always something I'm learning. And so as a student, if you put yourself in the mindset of I can always learn something, or or I'm going to participate in something that's going to make me a better referee in this case, it's just a great mindset. And so first of all, it's a mindset being a student and realizing that you can always learn something.
Exactly. Yeah, and even if hopefully you learn from a game that falls apart and you never let a game fall apart like that again. But you can also learn from games that don't fall apart, where you're thinking either I'm lucky I got away with that, or how did I get away with that, or maybe it's like, hey, that was enlightening. That's something I need to factor in the future. It's a good time to strike that balance of maybe don't be affected and impacted by the input of players, coaches, spectators, but filter it, see what you can glean from it, and then throw away what you don't need. Yeah, so the better you understand the overall game, coach and player tactics, the better you will be able to read the game, anticipate play, and be in the right place at the right time. So good referees are proactive because they are students of the game. They prepare in advance to avoid problems. And how exactly do you do this? What helps us be successful when being productive?
Did you mean to say what helps us be successful in being proactive?
Yes, thank you, Sally.
Okay. Obviously, if you're trying to be in the right place at the right time, and you're reading the game, you're gonna see the challenges that are gonna happen before they happen. You can see fire in people and be ready to just be right there when it happens and not get caught off guard. Being distracted with small things or whatever, being ready for things to fire up.
Yeah, that's a good approach. That's going to be lens conviction.
Talking to players, hearing players, seeing the way they're going into challenges, seeing the way they're accepting challenges early on. Seeing the banter, the reaction, the facial expressions, the body expressions. How are they talking to you, etc.
Yeah, good point, Keith. There's information constantly being fed to you. Whether some of it's overt and yelled in your face, and some of it's less overt, and you have to pick up on it. And then that's when you start asking, was that a good idea? Did I handle that correctly? How can I handle that better in the future? So these good referees, as Keith touched on, are students of the game. As Shelley touched on, they got a good sense of what's coming next. It's almost like you two read ahead. And then they use good management practices, because it's one thing to be able to pick up this information, but if you don't know how to then use it, it's squandered. And it's a great asset to be able to pick up this information. So it's good to have those techniques. And they include positioning, team tactics, foul recognition, and identifying key players and management. So with that, we're going to pass on to Miller for a quick talk on how to actually evaluate these situations.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you guys through the pregame, and then I'm going to take you through, let's get everything set up, the pregame, and then we'll take you into the game to think about what proactive means from a refereeing standpoint, okay? So if you guys were here 2 weeks ago, remember lots of conversation. This is a great place to learn and share. It's safe, right? So we can take risks by explaining some answers, what we think. So good participation here. I've got a couple slides where we'll share some ideas, and I've got some casework one case that I put together for you so that we can start working with it. So starting with the pregame. So think about it when you've got a game coming up. You're just entering the field. Put yourself in that mindset. Close your eyes if you need to, but really think about when I'm arriving on that pitch. What do you got to do before the game to get yourself ready as a referee for the game, right? And proactive is, that's forecasting what's going on, what's going to go on with this game right before it actually starts. And so this is very prudent for the pregame. So how can we be proactive before the game?
Understand what kind of game is it? Is it a playoff game? Is it a elimination game, obviously? Is it a regular league game? Is it early in the season? Is it late in the season?
Right.
Are those teams familiar with each other?
Yep, right, good.
I would say knowing who you're working with, and how long has it been since you've worked with those particular referees? I mean, it might have been 3 years since I worked with Lewis. I don't even know how long it's been, but who knows? There might be some stuff we need to catch up on to be sharp.
Sure, no, good point. Yeah, so so your referee team that you're working with, right? What's their skill level? What's their how much experience do they have? Do they have experience at this at the team level that as the previous point at this competition level or at this final match level, right? Good point.
I was going to say on a just personal level, make sure you have your uniform. If you're going to wear long sleeve, short sleeve, that you have your watches, your pencils, everything that you need to be successful yourself. You can do all of that ahead of time to prepare for the weather, prepare for whatever you're going to need for that 1 or 2 or more games, whatever it is.
Who's walked out on the pitch and forgot a yellow card or a coin? I've done it before, right? We don't want to do it's embarrassing, and hey Shelly, can I borrow your coin, right?
That's when you're really when you get to halftime and you realize you don't have your yellow card on you, you're like, okay, I'm really glad nothing happened. How'd I get away with that?
Good. So how do you be individually? How do you get yourself up for it? Regardless of what position, how do you get yourself up for the game? So I guess where I was trying to go with that is to think about it is, and I don't know if you guys have spent a lot of time playing. I know last time we talked, there were some players and there were some coaches, and perhaps there's some other people here that have done other sports, but there's a certain mental prep that you go through to get yourself up to the game, right? And that's basically checking in for the game, saying, hey, I'm fully present and I'm ready for this match. Obviously, fitness is always a good benchmark to come into a game, so you know that if it's a high-level match and you're going to probably run 5 or 6 miles, you've got the fitness to be at that point. They always talk about hydration. There's times when I've been out in the match where I'm halfway in, and all of a sudden you've got that dry mouth feeling, and you're like, okay, I got 25 minutes before halftime, and I just need to suck it up and keep moving on. But the hydration is important. You've got the coaches, team inspection, watching the teams warm up, obviously field inspection, weather. So there's a whole slew of things that you can do to get ready for the game. And go ahead.
I was going to say, and start out, we talk about this a lot in Team 3, to start the game, obviously you're talking about getting your mental state ready for the game. But for me, one of the really important things is to have a really positive first encounter with the coach and the players at check-in, and that goes a long way toward if that goes smoothly and that goes well, it makes me feel like, hey, things are gonna be good here. I got, I had that introduction. It seemed to be friendly, etc. And then you forgot you have to take your ibuprofen. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there.
Right. Good. So then, if we're proactive coming into the game, the pre-game, the question is why do we need to have good fitness? Why do we need to have a good warm-up or good hydration going into the game? How is that going to benefit you as a referee?
Well, these players condition and they train and they are hydrated. They're fully ready, expecting to give their best. And as a referee, you want to be able to give your best too. Train as hard or equally as they do, and run and be at your best level, so you can provide to them that same game they'd like to have.
Sure, great point, because it's a sporting event for you just as well as the players that you're officiating, right? And think about it, if you're not in that shape of, if you haven't done a good warm up, think about your potential for injury. If you do get injured, then how are you going to manage the match? If that's going to slow you down or prevent you from getting into your movement or your ability to move, get around the field, that could impact you in terms of your success in the game, right? What about weather and field conditions? How does that impact your performance in
I was going to say on hydration and fitness, also, people forget that you're affected mentally. Your thinking process is affected even before your physical performance gets hit. So that's one thing that's really important to keep in mind with fitness and hydration, is you're also keeping yourself mentally sharp.
Sure, good point. Excellent point. So tell me about weather and field conditions. How can that impact you?
It's something to consider, if you end up with really poor field conditions, or it's kind of on the edge, it's going to be something you have to consider maybe in the middle of the game. Like, does it reach a dangerous level? Does the weather get too hot? Are you going to have water breaks?
Sure.
Or what do they call those? I don't remember what they call them now.
Heat breaks or heat rests?
Yeah.
Hydration.
Yes.
Hydration break.
Is on the field. How you're going to make your runs and how to maybe change things up if you need to.
Is there the possibility that the game becomes unplayable, or that conditions might have you check safety conditions, etc.? I mean, obviously heat is a safety condition as well.
Yep. Injury potential, right, with that safety conditions, right? I can give you, so here's my example. So we do an amazing high school tournament right before the kids get out for Christmas, and so weather was good, and then all of a sudden the storms come in the night before, or actually 2 days before. It started lightly raining, so we had 2 days of light rain, so the fields were in good condition, and then that morning it unloaded and we had about an inch of water on the field. So this is a high school team, so U19, high level. They love to move the ball, good fast play. And think about when you move from a dry field to a wet field, how you have to think about your positioning and movement if you're on the whistle, right? You can't move as fast. You might lose your footing. You might not be in the right place at the same time. Realizing also that, hey, if you slip, you might hurt yourself, right? So weather and field conditions, it's a good thing to note going into that match to say, how do I accept what I have, what they've given me? Do I have to modify basically my game plan to do our work? So the mental focus, and Cindy, you were leading to that, right? Reading the game decisively, getting your head into the game, getting ready for the game, right? But being proactive. Having that mental focus gets us in the right frame set of reading that game, being decisive on our calls, right? And then dealing with uncertainty. Of course, there's no uncertainty when we referee, right? It's by the book. Yeah. Right? All the calls, the textbook. So a couple other points to share. So team and player and skill level in terms of considerations that affect referee performance, right? So by understanding team player skill level, you'll understand the pace and the style of the game, right? You'll think about who the key players are. So in terms of is it going to be a fast-paced game with a lot of through balls where you're going to have to do a lot of runs, or is it going to be a slow progression build-up where you have time to get into position, right? Team player skill level will also refine your communication style with those players, how you need to talk to them. Team players that are less skilled, you might have to do more communication to keep the control on, say, some of those looser challenges. Whereas if you're in a high school U19 or a high level AYSO level, you can use choice words because they already understand what the language of the game. So team player skill level, positioning, movement, speed. If we have fast attacks, you're going to have to be doing a bunch of sprints to stay up with the team, right? And then the last piece was the coach personality, and love that point in previous where you have a really good chance to set up your relationship with that coach and the players on first contact. So that's a good thing, right? Understand what if they're going to be a challenging coach, if they're a very, very positive coach, and that's going to help you establish your communication style with that coach, right? And then you also think about, hey, was that coach pretty loud? Is there any history there? Because they could have a huge effect on players, right? So these are the considerations, basically, when you're getting ready. This is the why behind why you're doing these various issues, okay? So here's, we're going to go into a casework. So let's just say that you've been assigned to this match. I grabbed a picture of Real Madrid team 2019 last year, and think about it. Would this be intimidating to you as a referee? That you got some pretty high level players, okay? So that's just to get the mindset going. So here's the casework I put together. I'm going to just do a quick read as you guys are reading through it. And what I want you to think about is, what would a proactive referee team do to prepare for the game? What would you include in the pregame? And how would this information be used to prepare the referee and the AR's game plan? Okay, and think about the previous slides about here's how we get ready for the game in the pregame, and then the why behind that, why we do that, okay? So you got basically two game coming up, two top-seeded U19 teams, Section 10 playoffs, and so my mind's going, hey, Bakersfield, this is where we were last November, right? So game slated at 10:30 on field 1, 35-minute halves. It's been raining up to the tournament, and 8 games have been played on the field prior to your match. So clear blue skies anticipated for the day, right? So you've aired for the blue team before, and remember they tend to play. Sorry, I'm on the screen. I lose some of the text here. So let me just move this around. It's a fast passing team. They like to take risks, and they do long through balls. So player skill level is high, and they play aggressive. So you didn't know anything about the red team, but you talked to the referee of the semifinal match, and you found out they are also fast and aggressive, tend to play a progressive build-up game, focusing on possession, and then they have explosive combination play, all right? So both teams have earned their spots in the finals, both experienced contentious games during pool play, numerous cautions, and you've overheard comments from both teams' parents criticizing the referees calling loose games and very biased calls. That never happens, of course, but I threw it in there just to get you to think on this one. So, okay, so you, as a referee or as an AR, put your game face on. This is my pregame. So what do you got to do to prepare for the game? What proactively can you think about to get ready for the game? What would you include in your discussions, and then how would you use this information to prepare for the game?
I think in your pregame, you'd want to mention your information that you know about each team, their tactics, so that the ARs can be prepared to help you. And then you can all be on the same page in terms of that. You can have them be listening for, you said both teams like to complain a little bit about calls. Have them listen for small problems and tell them to go ahead and handle small problems. Talk to the coach if something small happens, or talk to the players if they're by them if something small happens, to help you keep the game settled down.
Excellent.
Another thing you probably want to consider is we know that both teams are known for their misconduct or those cautions. So trying to be strategic going in and knowing whether we can maybe slow that down by trying to build a repertoire with the players before anything actually happens. Try to be a little more strategic before starting to throw those cautions out.
Good. Better to wait or better to get onto it immediately?
In terms of the caution or the behavior?
Communication, recognition of the fouls, and then setting the control.
Maybe
Yes,
look for some opportunities to call something early on. I mean, you're not going to manufacture anything, but to set a tone. If you believe that it's going to be a little rough, you can always ease back. But if you let it go and early, then you're going to have a hard time reeling it in. But maybe you look for a little bit of an opportunity right up front to set a tone for the game.
Good.
Or set your authority.
It's probably a game that I would talk a lot in, and I'd have to tell myself, use your outdoor voice, I'm a female, I don't have as loud of a voice, but speaking loud enough so that my coaches are hearing, that the players that are involved are hearing, and just making sure that they hear that I am seeing things, and when I am choosing and not choosing to call things, trying to keep things moving, and then not hesitating to use the whistle when it's necessary.
Excellent.
That'll keep it calm down.
Do you guys expect to move a lot in this game? Or do you expect it to be you'll be able to stay on pace of a pace of the attacks in most of the game? What do you expect?
You're going to want to be out in front of the play, be right up there. Because,
Yep.
You said the one team they take risks, with their long through balls.
Yep.
I don't want to be back in a defensive position there when that's happening.
Right, exactly. You might anticipate long runs where you got 30, 40, 45-yard runs where you're going to have to do some sprinting, right, on those through balls. And what about the red team? So they've got a slow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it would go a little bit slower. You might be able to read it a little bit easier, and maybe follow play a little bit more. But once they get going, you need to be right there because you have aggressive on the other side, and so you don't want things to get too heated.
Sure, you can take
they're closing.
Conservative posture on one standpoint as they're building up, and then you'd be ready to explode with some sprinting as they do their combination plays, right?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, is there anybody else that wants to comment before we move on?
Yeah,
real quick, some of these explosive combination plays could actually lead themselves to offside positionings where it's just a lot going on and lots of explosiveness there. So communicating with your ARs to really watch that offside line, watch those players, and communicate with you during that.
Great observation. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. When Shelly was talking about making sure she was heard, I was thinking you got two high-level teams here. Seems like skill level's pretty good. If you could show respect, it's going to be easy to manage early. You're going to make mistakes, and hopefully, if you've shown respect, they'll cut you some slack with that. You say, hey, look, yeah, but I got that one back there. I might have messed this one up. Especially as you get to it sounds like, is this the championship, Miller?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. So, you know, and it's 19U. So they've made it pretty far. These kids have been playing for a while. Usually these coaches, they have a pretty good idea of what they're doing. So if you show them respect, even if you don't get everything right, that can earn you a lot of credibility.
Excellent answers. Excellent answers. So we basically went through that pregame, right? We talked about fitness, mental prep, hydration, meeting coaches, watching them warm up, field inspection, weather, right? And the reason why is like fitness warm-ups, hydration, you know, this is going to be a fast game. So I better be warmed up going into the game, right? Because I'm going to be doing a lot of running. I'm going to be doing a lot of movement around, perhaps more on one team than the other, but I've got to be ready for that. Weather, field conditions. Well, we've got some rain, so maybe it might be soft. So positioning wise, if I do a lot of sprinting and I got a wet field, I'm going to have to kind of sense it when I'm on the pitch, right? If it's a real wet field, I'm going to have to be really careful on my sprinting so I don't get injured. But I also need to anticipate some of those plays so I can be close on in proximity to ball, right? Right. So that's where the weather and field conditions come in. Mental focus. Guess what? I got two high-level teams. I gotta be ready to play. As soon as that whistle goes, my mental focus is going to be there, and I'm going to be ready to play. Team player skill level, very, very high level, right? Two very high-level teams. Pace, style in the team is going to dictate, just like we were talking about, and the pace and the style of their play is going to dictate my positioning and movement on the field. I'm going to be looking for some of their key players because I might have to track them in terms of their plays or some of their challenges, right? And so you can see how all that pregame homework, quote unquote, can really help you getting yourself ready for the game. So great, great comments, great comments. So so let me go to the next one. Okay. So now we're moving into the during the game. So being proactive during the game. So I'm not giving you very much here. And my thought is I just want to get your feelings for when you see this. What are you looking at? Okay. And what I want you to do is I want you to look at it for two levels. One level is, so I'm getting my, one is the viewpoint of the player, the challenge, right? So there's the contact point. All right. And then I want you to think about, then I'm going to take it to the next level. Okay. But let's keep it from the viewpoint of the play challenge first. What do you guys, when you see this, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm not sure, but it kind of looks like it's a goalkeeper in orange, and she's come out with her leading foot up into the blue player.
Yep.
Looks kind of nasty.
Yep. So keeper is in orange, correct? Whether or not, so there's a question of whether or not she got the ball with the player. Yep.
She was leading with that foot up in a weaponized manner.
Right. Could be, right? Any advantage call here?
Well, it doesn't look like that the attacker has any teammates nearby from what we can see, and she certainly lost her footing, so probably not likely to have advantage.
Correct, correct. Possible injury, right?
Yeah.
Possible injury to that blue player. Maybe the player also with the contact with the goalie. Maybe injury with the goalie. Misconduct. Possibly, right? Like you were saying, you had a straight leg charge with cleats up, so that's possible. All right, all right.
Blue's going to be angry, so you better be ready.
You got to be ready, right? Right. Okay. So all good points. Okay. So let's take this to the next level. Okay. So what is it? So tell me about this. Let's analyze this from a 30,000 foot view. So not necessarily the actual challenge itself, but let's open the scope of what a proactive referee needs to think about from a 30,000 foot level. And I'm just using this play as a context to just to get us thinking. So let me ask a leading question. So I hear a little quiet. So is this a U14 team where if a goalie came in and slid hard on the ball with a player, they'd understand it and they'd accept it? Or is this a much higher level team where this type of play is acceptable as part of the game, whether or not misconduct is involved?
I don't really see it as a very acceptable challenge either way, even with the level of play, but that's my call on it. I'm like looking at her face, I'm looking at the height of her body as she's falling, like no matter what, like that doesn't go unnoticed for any player, I don't think. Like somebody said, like she's gonna be mad.
Sure, she's gonna be mad, right?
And her teammates are gonna be mad.
So regardless of this, so in this play then, really understanding the, I mean, obviously it's a hard challenge foul, and understanding even at the skill level and this maturity of play, they're going to say, yeah, it's a hard foul, and I expect this to be seen and adjudicated properly, right? Right. What about it? Is this the first time? So let me ask you. It's hard to from this photo, but is this the first time this foul has happened, or is this a repeated occurrence? How would that affect you from a proactive standpoint and helping you manage the game?
Well, if this has happened more than once, you're not managing the game very well.
And if this is the first time, you need to be proactive and handle it in a way that will keep it from happening again.
Sure. So is it so the question is it a pattern, right? Is this for, like you said, the first time you've seen it, or is it a pattern? Could 28, or I'm not sure what number the blue player is that one of their key players? Is that a playmaker, right? And does the other team know that? And tactically what they're doing is they're going after that playmaker as a way of controlling and gaining advantage on their team, right? To slow down their attack, right? So part of it is identifying the key players as being a proactive referee. And then the other thing is, after this happens, it's cataloging that player's response to that challenge, right? Is that blue player going to be really, really mad at that orange keeper challenge, or would she brush it off and say, yep, fair challenge, it was a 50-50 simultaneous contact on ball? Hard to tell from this, right? And so my goal here was to say that when you think about from a proactivity standpoint, you have to look at individual plays, specifically challenges, but at the same time, you have to think about it from a tactical standpoint, 30,000-foot view on how everything is working, okay? And so in reading the game, assessing maturity and skill level of players, we talked about that, right? Can they handle this type of aggressive play? Can they handle those challenges? Is that challenge accepted? It's accepted in, say, FIFA level or MLS level, where it might not be in an AYSO level, right? And so assessing them at the maturity and skill level of players will help you be proactive in reading that game, right? Recognizing the team tactics. Is that a key player where the defense is actually going after them to try to slow that player down? That can be used to where in reading the game from a standpoint of, hey, you need to buckle down and you need to spend some more time controlling that defense and bringing that game back under control, right? Identifying foul targets and patterns. This might be persistent infringement, and you might have multiple players going after that blue attacker, right? And so there might be a repeated tactic by that defending team to try to slow that blue player down, right? And then understanding, and this gets back to the assessing maturity and skill level of players, is what's their response to those fouls. When you get into high level of play, aggressive play is actually accepted. as long as that you have to read the player's facial expressions after that challenge. I've been in many games in U19 where I see just a brutally hard challenge, but they come after it and say, yep, that was a 50-50 ball, great shot. And I wouldn't have expected that. And so you have to read the response to those challenges and fouls. Okay, so also being a proactive referee, I need to get back here. Here we go. The ultimate objective, just getting back to that flow and control, right? Because this is reading the game, keeping everything in control. All right. So there's couple other thoughts. We talked about this 2 weeks ago about the importance of being the thinking referee. Is that when we get into this area, anything that impacts your ability to think affects your ability to control the match, right? And so getting into reading the game or not having a really good pregame, going into it in a really strong mental state, getting yourself up to that game, that could impact your ability, right, to control the match, all right? And then adding to that, what about there's two other issues, and fatigue, right? So we talked about endurance and warm-ups and coming into the game, but how does fatigue affect you, right? So, you know, your ability to think, you communicate. Have you guys been in situations where you've been in a really an exhaustive game and you think back and say, wow, that was really hard to keep my mind focused on the game because I was focusing on just staying up at play. And have you guys been in those type of games before?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it's not always down to the referee's preparedness, right? Sometimes it's just a hot day. There's something distracting going on the touchline. It's your 5th game in a row. That makes it hard, difficult. They all start blending together.
Right. So when you get into the fatigue standpoint, right? If you get tired, you're going to have a hard time thinking. You can have a hard time making decisions, right? So just something to think about is that getting yourself up for the game, getting some good endurance into the season is definitely going to help you with the games. What about the impact of stress in terms of making proactive decisions? I love this photo. This is one of the best photos I found about referees staying in control. How is this going to trigger? How can this affect your ability of reading the game or being proactive?
I think in the situations of impact of stress, you got to start just taking it to your own next level. You got to be more obvious of what's going on, be in front of play, and also make sure that you're anticipating play, because it's just that stressful of a game. You need to turn it on that much more that you're doing the job that you need to do out there.
Sure.
Something I've done as an AR when there's been a stressful game going on for the referee late in the game, whistle blown, I'll hold my flag up to have the referee come over to talk to me. And I'm doing nothing more than giving them a break.
Yeah.
Basically stopping the game, give the players a chance to cool down and and they're all wondering what we're talking about. But I'm just blowing off 30 seconds to give them a break. I learned that from a friend of mine who did it for me, and I've done it myself for some other people a few times.
Nice. Well, the lesson plan that they talk about in this proactive refereeing course talks about internal and external triggers. The internal triggers are really getting yourself. It's that mental preparation for the game. And internally, if you come into some hard calls, you might start second guessing yourself. Did I make the right call? Oops, I missed that one. And you might start getting down on yourself mentally, right? So that internally, that can start affecting you, increasing your stress level, and then pushing you off of your game, right? As a referee, right? Your external triggers, an obvious one, right? A tough challenge, something that the team did not agree on, and then you have these guys basically yelling at you, saying, "Hey, what's up with the call, ref? You didn't see that." Whatever, right? And that can definitely raise the stress level, right? So what's the best way to combat these? You know, deal with the problems early when everybody's clearly thinking. Maybe easier to say that, but dealing with the problems early, that really hit home with me, because it's like, okay, once I see the problem, let's deal with it. Don't let it keep going and brewing and brewing and brewing where it can escalate to something like this. All right. So so positioning, movement, intuition, and thinking. You know, being where you need to be, see where you need to see, and call what needs to be called. This was my favorite quote of the section that I was doing about proactive refereeing, because it really emphasizes just a good credo. If you're there where you need to be, you're going to be close to play, right? If you see what you need to see, you've got a clear vision of what happened, and then you call what needs to be called. So you've internalized, yep, here's what I see, and you make the call. And so so good words to think about. And then the final piece here on proactive refereeing, they talk about proximity to play, right? So what's proximity to you? What is proximity to a challenge, to a fast break, to a shot on goal?
I think proximity to play really has to be a very specific, tailored approach. Are you too close? Are you too far? Is it a fast-paced game where things are moving quickly? Maybe you need to back off just a little bit. So close enough where you can make those judgments without being in the way of play or in the lines of play or through balls or those kinds of things based off of, you know, the way the players are playing and being in that right viewpoint.
Okay, so to your point, right? Exactly. So angle and distance, right? So so you gotta have the right angle to see what you're seeing, right? And the appropriate distance to be able to get a clear vision of what's going on, right? And just like you said, you got speed coming in, using the speed that you utilize to get your angle and distance, right? And then you just know that if it's going to be a hard challenge, you know, you're going to have to change your velocity to basically close that space quicker. Proximity to play, being proactive, you know, using your AR to help you basically see that play, right? So getting a good visual communication with the AR, making that quick glance a couple times during the runs to see if they have a better angle on one of the challenges, right? They talk about staying out of the player's way. We understand that. That's always difficult if we can't read play. Anticipate the next play location. So this is especially when you're moving up to the higher level of play. You always want to think about where are they going to play the ball next, and try to set yourself up to where you can move to that position, right? They also talk about this time-based priority of when those critical fouls or calls that need to be made. They talk about the first 10, last 10 minutes of a half, right? First 10, everything gets going. New teams or whatever, they're trying to understand your boundaries. And so if you're very, very loose in that first 10 minutes, then that team will start can be spinning out of control a little faster, right? The last 10 of the first half or second half, right? Those are going to be critical times, especially if they need to score an equalizer or they need to go up to win the game, right? On goals, you got to watch goals because there can be a lot of friction when goals are scored, and especially in the foul situations, right? That's when you want to be close, because you're going to have conversation. You can have that risk and that potential of aggressive players being close, and so that's all wrapped around being proactive. And so so that's during the game, and then Lewis will finish off with a few more points on proactivity.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Miller. Yeah, so we want to deal with foul play, and as Miller touched on, the best time to do that is deal with it clearly, openly, and deal with it early so that it doesn't grow. If you keep the monster small, it's a lot easier to conquer. So let's dig into a couple examples on how to do this. So I got a clip here. Again, the audio does not come through, but it doesn't add a whole lot to these. So there was a whistle there, I'll tell you that much. So how would we deal with this? Let's say this happens early in a fairly boring game. How is somebody going to deal with this? I got the view of everyone here. I'm going to start looking for someone who I haven't heard from yet. How about Kristen or Chandler? Oh, Alex is going. No?
Kristen or Chandler can go.
What's the question you want?
So with this clip here, where there's an offense, which doesn't look that bad, and then there's a whistle fairly quickly, and then you get the reaction of the player in red who picks up the ball. There we go. How would you take the opportunity to deal with this proactively? Let's say this occurs early in a fairly mellow match. What are you thinking of doing?
Well, he really picked the ball up really fast, but he pushed the kid off the ball pretty fast too. So I think I'd blow my whistle and go over to the kid that pulled up the ball and take the ball maybe from him, and then go and talk to him and tell him, what are you doing? That wasn't okay. And then go to the other kid and make sure he was okay. And then possibly, give him an indirect free kick or just do a throw in on that one. Since the ball did go out of bounds, right?
Actually, what happened is I said we don't have audio here. It doesn't really take away from the clip. The whistle was blown. We did lose that from the clip. Yeah, so the offense, that charging offense, pushing offense was whistled. Yeah, you can see how mellow the player's being here. I like that. I like that. Give a talk. This isn't really something we want to let propagate, right? Put a pin in this early. Do we need a different reaction if it's a contentious game?
If it was later in the game and not beginning of the game, then and this has been going on, then I'd definitely start pulling out warnings. But if this is like the beginning of the game, talking to what I think would do well enough.
Okay, yeah. Then you got time to set the tone early, but if it's a high-level game and you're getting toward the end of it, it might be tougher to keep that reined in. Thank you, Kristen.
So Lewis, it's an interesting problem that you rose, because you have to deal with the actual pushing or the slamming of the ball, right? But there can be a bigger picture effect of what's going on, right? So you actually have to look at both of those, don't you?
Sorry, you caught me in the middle of a sneeze there. Yeah, there's.
I planned that.
I'd
really,
say
you really want to see what the situation with the team's going on, right? Because if there's a bunch of frustration with the teams, it might be that just one red player is just acting out for 4 or 5 other red players, and you've got a much bigger problem brewing.
Yeah. If something like this rarely comes out of the blue, this looks like some frustration built up, right? And this was pretty targeted.
I have a hard time believing that it was a mellow match with that boy on the field. He seemed pretty hot.
He is not running mellow today.
No.
Come on. Good play. All right. So you see how far he comes from, and he is just locking eyes with that referee. The referee's body language is saying, "I'm not dealing with it proactively." Yeah, that's a good point. There's something that led to this, right? What was this? Somebody was recently saying anytime they give a red card, they ask themselves, okay, what happened that built up to that? Not taking blame for it, but identifying ways to proactively handle that. I forget who said that earlier in this season's focus discussions. I have a nagging suspicion that it's Tim Haddad. We'll credit you with it, Tim. I really like that idea. Yeah, so there's something that led to it, and maybe we're thinking, why weren't we proactive enough? You know, it's probably time to deal with this. As was said, we don't want to let this keep going on in the game. Yeah. So something built up, and maybe this player's the enforcer. Maybe this player felt wronged by something previously. Definitely a situation crying to be handled. All right. How do we keep these small problems small? So let's look at that last one. The offense, not that bad. How do we keep this not much bigger than that initial offense, that pushing, that charging?
I would say you talk to the players. You said it's a boring game, so not much is going on, and we don't really want much more than that pushing offense to go on. So our reaction to the red player, I think, would say a lot, and how we respond to them. So we're just loud enough if we say no, so that everyone hears, and then catch that player later on in a lull moment while we're waiting for the ball to be retrieved, and try to connect with the player at more of a level beyond just referee versus player.
Perfect. I like that. So there's an advantage there that we have in the youth game that the pro game doesn't have, where the ball goes out of play and there isn't some teenager there ready to just throw a spare ball back right away. We actually get these built-in breaks where everyone's settling down. If we're tired, we get to catch our breath, or we can go do something proactive like this. Talk with the player. So Alex's approach is letting the player cool off a bit, which is a powerful tactic. I like that. We noticed in that clip the player was making some pretty firm eye contact with the referee. The referee was averting his gaze. He looked fairly nonplussed. It's pretty critical to keep good eye contact with players, not only as a control mechanism, but as a relational interactive mechanism, as Alex touched on, connecting in a way beyond player referee. So it's a good point, Alex. There's also simple tool, the voice, which can be loud, broadcasted for everyone to observe, or it can be quiet one-on-one up close, and those both have their strengths. And even the one-on-one up close, unless you're doing it on a run by, that still has some broadcast effect to it as well, because the referee is singling out this player, approaching this player and talking to them. So that's something with witnesses. Miller touched on the strong first 5, first 10, last 5, last 10. So you can establish your tone early. What's one thing we all hear, even if our back's to the field, when we're out, say in Bakersfield, backs to the field, but all of a sudden we know something happened. What tells us that?
The parents, their tone.
Yeah, the parents will do that. There's another thing that'll give us whiplash. Now, what's that?
Would it be the whistle?
There we go, Miller. Yeah. So we're whistling loudly for harsh foul situations that the referee needs to send a signal right away. I'm going to handle this, even if the referee's not right on top of it. Of course, it helps to be close to play. Proximity lends conviction. And this positive game control, you can be interactive, connect with the players. The players generally respond well to that. They have to be in a pretty foul mood to not respond well to that. And of course, with the dissent that we saw in that clip just now, and the potential unsporting behavior, those are things to handle early. Dissent is one where you get to a point, if you pull out a card, you gotta pull out 4 or 5, and that's a rough situation to be in. So rather than figure out how to handle that, if you do figure out how to handle that well, let me know, because I would prefer to stay away from it in the first place. And then finally, watch for and deal with persistent infringement. I don't want to dive too deeply into this one. It is a critical thing. We have done focus discussions solely on this. Very hard to track, and it's useful nonetheless. Players are aware of it. You know when the coaches are yelling at you, that's 3. You don't know if they've made up that number 3, or if they've actually counted 3 offenses by the same player, but they're definitely aware of it. So just real quickly, I want to blow back through some position yourself proactively for high-risk situations. Miller already touched on this for the most part, but what are some areas on the field that pose more problems? You take one occurrence in one place, and it's not much, but you put it in another place, and it's all of a sudden a bigger problem, and you need to be more attentive to it.
Penalty area.
Penalty area. It's a match critical situation.
In front of the bench.
In front of the bench, yeah. I could think of one more, and it's usually sneaky. Away from the ball. It's hard to forgive things that occur away from the ball. Also, keep in mind a player that's looking at you every time you see them. Unless you're looking funny that day or looking very good that day, you got to wonder, why are they staring at me? Are they looking for an opportunity to not be seen, and then they're gonna do whatever they're ready to do? Or is this challenging behavior? Has anyone ever noticed this? Or how about this? You ever seen a player on the ground who you know is not injured? They're looking up to see where the referee is. Yeah. They get better. They learn not to do that. They learn to keep their head down, act like they're dying. Hard plays, tactical fouls. You all know this one. And then we touched on critical errors on the field. And then you ever notice those magnets? Bad stuff just happened. No, ref, it wasn't me. It just happened again. You know, even if you missed it, even if it's off the ball, you start recognizing same player. Maybe this is a player I need to be aware of. Maybe I need to ask my ARs for help tracking this player off the ball, or I need to linger a little bit after the ball's left to see what's going on. There's always that unbalanced match, right? An 8-0 match can be really easy to referee, or it can be really hard. I'm sure we've all run into problems with that. And in any game, there are those key pairings. Usually a skilled attacker with a stronger defender, team leader, making sure they stay in their place. And then there's that referee fatigue that always builds. And then one more, I think some of us here get impacted by this final one. I'm a club lines person. Someone who's untrained. You lose 2 of your 6 eyes on the field. And that's like a whole lot more than losing a third of your team. Your movement changes, your focus changes. What if you got 2 of them? You're pretty much out there solo. All right. How about another video? I'm going to pick on someone after this if no one pipes up, so be ready. There's a whistle there. All right, so what if you've been managing this player, this defender in yellow? You've been managing them all match. This is in a 60-minute match. You're in your 50th minute here. How are we going to handle this if we've been working on keeping that player in control the whole game? It'd be nice if this web meeting had kind of a roulette to them. I could just randomly pick someone. I know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it depends what I've been telling them so far, but there's 10 minutes left in the game. And if my options are caution, no caution, and continue just talking to them, am I going to gain more from that player and from the game by doing one final, hey, we've been talking about this all game. This is it. This is your last chance. Or am I going to gain more from pulling out a caution right there and hoping that keeps the player in control for the last 10 minutes? I think the environment has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, that's fair. If you've been managing them all game, you're unless you're really, really good, you're starting to run out of opportunities, right? Running out of techniques to manage them.
That's what sorry, I was talking, but I was muted. So, I was going to say it's a good point on Alex. What's your level of engagement up to that point been? I mean, we talk about private word, public word. What's the expectations of? You can kind of feel the expectations of the game on you at that point. I mean, you've exhausted your misconduct options maybe, and it's time to do that.
Yeah, at some point we start running out of ways to get out, and not even because of our own shortcomings, but the coaches, spectators may start noticing how many times you talk to a player, and they say, "Hey, look, how many times before you give them a card?" And you showed your hand there.
It also looks to me like the orange player, he commits the foul, then just gets up and gets ready for the restart. So it's clear that he feels that the referees are going to accept that without taking further action.
Good point. It's a fairly controlled foul, is it not?
Tactical.
And this attacker, we talk about those pairings, right? This attacker looks pretty skilled. And it's almost like the defender says, I was beat by him again. We need to shut this down. It's right in front of his bench, too. He might have something to prove to his coach. If the coach had been giving him a hard time for messing up in the last few minutes, he's shutting something down there. So, all right, yeah. So those are some good items to think on. So let's bring this all back together. As Miller touched on pretty early, a good referee is going to have their homework done. They're going to be mentally, physically, tactically ready at the point they step onto the field. And as Keith was saying, that can start early. First contact, and can start even earlier as you share what you've noticed refereeing these teams before. So that can be valuable, having that background. It's not always something we get at the youth game, whereas with the pros, they're expected to study footage of the teams, of the players. Constantly reading the game gives you this foresight, allows you to anticipate play and establish good game control. I think Angela was touching on this pretty early on tonight. So that's a very valuable asset to have, to be able to take in that information, process it, and then figure out what's going to happen next before it does, so you can be there, be ready to handle it. And then always be ready to proactively move to where you need to be for what's going to happen once you got that information. Don't get caught on the back foot. If you know what's going to happen, act on it. So this anticipation and this foul recognition can help the referee control the match and provide a good game, provide good game management. Keep small problems small. Handle problems early. So it's very valuable. And it's a useful tactic out there. And the ways in which you can be proactive, your avenues will broaden as you get more and more experienced. There are things you think you understood, things you think you had figured out, and maybe they don't work. Maybe the way they work evolves. You keep finding ways to be proactive, which is one of the exciting things about refereeing. Is there's always improvement. There's always some situation you haven't seen before. Do we have any questions on this? Anybody want to throw out some last input before we wrap up here? I don't know if you hear my dog snoring in the background, but she's ready for us to be done. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and especially Miller for doing this. This was the workshop that Miller and I were going to lead at the Expo in March, and we didn't have the opportunity to do that. So thanks for keeping that opportunity alive, Miller.
Thank you, Lewis. That was awesome.
Really great. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Miller. It was great. Sorry I wasn't as talkative.
That was strange. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Going forward, our next focus discussion is on June 4th. So that's, again, the Thursday after next. The one change I want to point out with that is it's going to be an hour earlier than normal. We're not switching them all, just that one, because our instructor is 3 hours ahead. It seemed a little bit rough to ask him to start teaching at 10 p.m. So we will start at 6 p.m. our time. It was 10, so that'll be 9 p.m. his time. So that will be Jimmy Stewart. And I'm following that up on June 18th. I've got Phil Briggs booked. He's going to touch on the law changes that will be in effect by then, and I suspicion some other law changes too, because it doesn't seem all that substantial in our realm this year. So maybe we'll get a year to catch up with the law changes. So we have things coming down the pipeline. I hope these are of value to everybody. We hope you all keep coming. So thank you very much.